Well, guys, the SNP's independence bid has been ridiculed yet again, and by Scottish economists this time, who not only point out the flaws in her independence dream that involves joining the EU, but also the fact that she will bankrupt Scotland even if they are allowed to use the Great British Pound after independence, which I would obviously have a massive problem with, and so would most of you. It goes without saying, no country should be using the currency of another, least of all one like Scotland, under the SNP, who would borrow untold billions against our currency if they could right now, let alone as an independent nation. Now, once again, the Express have picked up on the latest SNP slapdown, so let's have a butcher's at that quickly. It headlined Sturgeon's independence dream crushed as Scots don't even have money for buses. And what they mean there is not the Scottish people in general, but the country itself doesn't have the money to fix its buses or sort any of it out. It does actually sound like at first they were talking about people in Scotland are too piss poor to even afford a bus fare. That was what made me look at it. I will tell you now though, that is not what they mean. It says Nicola Sturgeon's independence dream is unachievable, as Scotland does not even have money to invest in buses, an economist has told express.co.uk. It said ahead of Scotland's 2014 independence referendum, the Scottish Nationalist Party tried to reassure voters by citing a resurgent economy, a relatively modest budget deficit, and the prospects of free trade with both the UK and the EU. However, things look very different now. Brexit means that an independent Scotland in the EU, the SNP's goal as we know, would face a hard border with England, its most important market. And yes, a hard border would certainly be needed, not to keep the Scots out, but to keep the new Scots that Nicola Sturgeon would certainly import. As we all know, she would open the borders right up the second they're back in Europe. And if she did that, they would be streaming straight across the border into England. Let me tell you something, we would need a border wall, 200 metres high and manned by thousands of guards. Passport checks to make sure you are Scottish when you are coming through. Or if you're from another country, you actually have the right to enter the UK briefly as a tourist. We all know what the open borders of the EU ends in. We've been dealing with it for years. Now that we're out, certainly fuck that shit. It goes on. Moreover, data released in August showed Scotland's national fiscal deficit climbing to 15 billion in the year to April, even before the worst of the coronavirus crisis was felt. Saying to anyone, Scotland would be in the shit if this lunatic was running the show. Because remember, people might say she's running the show now, but she's not. She's a puppet of Boris Johnson and Westminster at the end of the day. It says, while in the past few months, opinion polls have given Yes campaigners a consistent lead over their unionist rivals, economists are now warning that the economic and fiscal difficulties of leaving the UK look substantially greater than they did when voters rejected the idea in 2014. Because obviously, since 2014, we've had 6 years of SNP government wasting money up in Scotland. The deficit only increases with these socialist losers. In an interview with Express.co.uk, economics professor at Edinburgh Napier University, Portois Jarosky or some shit, I don't know, cast a shadow over the SNP's plans to achieve independence, as he claimed Scotland doesn't even have money to pay for buses. He said, we will either go bankrupt or we will have to cut our spending. No, you will probably have to do a bit of both. You will have to cut your spending and then Nicola Sturgeon will still send you bankrupt, likely because of what she's already done. Maybe that's why they demanded another 2 billion the other day, while apparently still sitting on 8.5 billion that the government has already given them. He says, but there is a problem with that. If we really want to leave Britain and join the EU, we would need to go through a very harsh transformation of the public sector. I don't think the Scottish people are prepared for this. No, of course they're not. This would obviously involve massive cutbacks and things like that to the services that people actually use. And obviously it would all be thanks to the Scots Nat Prats. He noted, so if we have a referendum, Scottish people might vote for going out, but they would almost immediately realise that it means no more free prescriptions. Then it would be too late. Which, yeah, is actually something that people would really consider and would actually hurt them. The SNP might try and say that we will pay for it, but I don't know how they will do that without borrowing untold millions as they want to do now. But obviously, they're not allowed because they're part of the UK and they don't make decisions like that, thank fuck. He goes on, moreover, because of the state of its economy, the professor argued it will be very unlikely Brussels will allow an independent Scotland to join its bloc, something we have pointed out many times before. And he said, first of all, countries that have splitting tendencies, such as Spain or Belgium, will never agree to it. Yeah, because it will promote the idea in their countries, and they ain't gonna fucking want that, are they? Let's be honest there. He said, you then got countries like Germany and France, and the question is, why should they want Scotland in? Personally, I don't know why. Well, I can tell you why they won't, because Scotland is of no use to them. As he says here, we don't have a big economy, we would have problems almost like Greece in terms of public deficit. Is it really in their interest to have another Greece? No, of course it's not, but I feel Scotland would probably be worse than Greece given the government that the Scots Nats Prats would be. It says here the Economist claims were recalled by Ronald MacDonald, research professor of macroeconomics and international finance at Glasgow University's Adam Smith Business School, who argued Miss Sturgeon's independence bid is incredibly dangerous. No, it's just incredibly stupid. Though I would say he is right in the sense that it's incredibly dangerous for the people of Scotland. Not for her, she's rich as shit and it ain't gonna matter. He said the underlying deficit has not changed too much since last year. No, it's actually gone up and it's probably going to go up even more. He says it went up by 0.5%, I think. That is not a sustainable deficit in itself. So they, the SNP, have argued in the Growth Commission report that they could handle that by having higher growth if they were independent, but they haven't said how they are going to get it. Because, of course, it's just a fantasy to get the people of Scotland to do what they want. And he goes on, of course, on top of that, you have the coronavirus crisis, which means the deficit going forward, it will probably be somewhere in the 20% region or even 30%. That's a huge deficit, and the EU will never let you in with that, let me tell you. The First Minister's argument, the macroeconomist noted, seems to be that she can do what other governments are doing, which is to borrow heavily on financial markets at relatively low interest rates. However, Mr. MacDonald claimed there was a huge problem with that. He continued their strategy for an independent Scotland is to have a relatively long transition period where they continue to use sterling, the great British fucking pound. Which obviously has me saying, go fuck yourself, Scots Nat Prats. How can you be an independent supporting Scottish nationalist party that hates Britain while using the great British pound? That is just fucking laughable. A bit like an independence party wanting to join the European Union. But then again, you are a bunch of clowns, so should we really be surprised? He said borrowing a foreign currency is a very dangerous strategy, particularly if you are borrowing the kinds of sums of money they are talking about. The reason for that is if you adopt sterlinisation, that is a form of rigidly fixed exchange rate. The UK has a flexible exchange rate. It means that when you get a shock to the economy, you have some means to adjust the economy to that. By adopting the currency of another country, you really are fixing your currency against that currency, and you've got no means of adjustment. That is just not tenable for an independent country. I have argued separately that it could lead to bankruptcy. And he finishes with, they haven't thought through the macroeconomic framework. They haven't thought through anything. They just have an agenda. That is all they care about. Getting out of the UK and hating England at the same time. Now, obviously, you don't really need to be an economist to work out that the SNP would take Scotland down the shitter if they got independence. Obviously, though, it's always good when you hear it from people with a little bit of experience and knowledge in these areas. Though, to be honest, none of this will matter. The SNP will plough on with the same old bullshit as they do, and their fanatical followers will toe the line like a bunch of soy boys, as we know.
There is a pattern consistent throughout history of oppressed people turning on the oppressors, slaves against their owners, the peasantry against the feudal barons, colonies, Mr. Verhofstadt, against their empires. And that is why Britain is leaving. And it doesn't matter which language you use, we are going and we are glad to be going. We're off.